Welcome inside the EP Official Election Center. My name is Ryan Guest, and I'm here with a prediction for the 2028 Democratic presidential primary. The long and winding calendar begins in South Carolina, where a historically large number of candidates are vying for the nomination. It'll take close to 2,000 delegates to secure the nomination, delegates that will be awarded across all 50 U.S. states, the District of Columbia, and 6 territories. Here are the front runners, based on the latest national polling averages available as of February 5th, 2028, California Governor Gavin Newsom maintains the edge he has held since last September, garnering an average of 23% support. He leads the early favorite, Michigan's junior United States Senator Pete Buttigieg. A Cinderella story in the 2020 primaries, they called him Mayor Pete then. He's a senator now and holds about 20% of the national vote today. In third place is Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, who has remained steady at around 15 to 16% over the last few months. In fourth, former Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer sits at about 10%. She's followed by Maryland Governor Wes Moore, who has been on a meteoric rise in recent weeks. He currently sits at 9% nationally, but is polling higher in the first primary state of South Carolina, where he hopes to pull off a surprising victory in just a few minutes. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear is in 6th with about 6%, followed by a host of other candidates below 5% entering tonight's contest. We'll be back with the results right after the break. The first official votes of the 2028 presidential election cycle are set to come in out of South Carolina merely seconds from now, as Democrats take the first step in their effort to win back the White House. South Carolina was moved to the front of the calendar to better reflect the diversity of the Democratic electorate, a state where support among African Americans is absolutely critical. Tonight's race is expected to come down to the national favorite, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and the surging candidacy of Maryland Governor Wes Moore, and we've got the results right now. All right, we have a major projection right now. Election Pulse has called the race in South Carolina for Wes Moore. That's right, the Maryland governor, who has dominated headlines in recent weeks, was surging in state-level polling, and he has now secured a historic victory. Here are the final projected results. Moore wins with approximately 22% of the vote, garnering more than 180,000 votes out of nearly 820,000 cast statewide, setting a new Democratic primary turnout record here in the Palmetto State. Newsom finishes second with 17.1%, ensuring a strong delegate haul tonight. He's followed by Josh Shapiro in third at around 13%. Keep in mind, Democratic primary rules require a candidate to receive at least 15% of the statewide vote to qualify for statewide delegates. Pete Buttigieg finishes in a disappointing fourth, though his struggles with black voters in past elections made this result largely expected. Andy Beshear and Gretchen Whitmer round out the top 6. We'll have to wait and see how they perform at the congressional district level before determining whether they'll receive any delegates tonight. Further down the results, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly places a distant 7th with less than 5% of the vote, followed by Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker in 8th and Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey in 9th. With the win, Moore is projected to receive 26 delegates out of the 55 awarded tonight. Newsom will take 19, Shapiro 6, and Buttigieg 3. Since only Moore and Newsom cleared the 15% statewide threshold, they are the only candidates eligible for statewide delegate allocation. Shapiro, Buttigieg, and Andy Beshear, who picks up 1 delegate tonight, each surpassed 15% in at least one congressional district, earning them a small share of delegates. Time will tell what impact this first contest has on the rest of the field.
This is CNN Breaking News.
The fallout of the South Carolina Democratic primary is in, and it's already reshaping the race. Wes Moore's victory has catapulted him onto the national stage, shaking up the dynamics of this already unpredictable primary. The Maryland governor's strong performance in South Carolina wasn't just a win, it was a statement. His ability to build a broad coalition, particularly among black voters, proved decisive, and now he's heading into the next contests with undeniable momentum. Just weeks ago, Moore was seen as an intriguing newcomer. Now he's a serious contender. But while Moore's campaign is celebrating, others are calling it quits. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, California Congressman Ro Khanna, and Colorado Governor Jared Polis have all suspended their campaigns. After disappointing finishes in South Carolina, none of them saw a realistic path forward. Pritzker, despite his deep pockets, never gained real traction. Khanna, a leading progressive voice, struggled to expand his base. And Polis, once seen as a potential disruptor, failed to carve out a lane in a crowded field. Their exits clear some space in the race, but the competition is only getting fiercer. With Moore surging, Newsom holding steady, and Shapiro quietly gaining ground, the fight for the nomination is far from settled. All eyes now turn to the next primaries, where the stakes just got even higher. It's another primary night in America. With South Carolina in the rear view, the Democratic calendar now moves west to Nevada and north to New Hampshire. New Hampshire will be the first to report results, with some polls closing at 7 p.m. Eastern Time and the rest at 8. Its famously independent electorate often bucks national trends. The early delegate leaders, Moore, Newsom, Shapiro, and Buttigieg, all see paths to victory, but someone needs to take control of this race. Moore's momentum is undeniable after his win in South Carolina, gaining several points in the national average over the last few days, but New Hampshire presents the first test as to whether his momentum translates to a less diverse electorate. Newsom, still searching for his first win, is under pressure to deliver, especially in his home state's neighbor to the east. Buttigieg, polling second nationally, has struggled in Nevada before. A weak finish, especially after a rough South Carolina showing, could put his campaign in serious trouble. We'll be back with the results right after the break. We're approaching the top of the hour here, 8 o'clock in New Hampshire, and we're just moments away from a key projection in the first primary of the night. Can Wes Moore carry his momentum forward? Will Gavin Newsom finally notch his first win, or will another candidate shake up the field? We're about to find out. Here we go. Election Pulse now projects that Pete Buttigieg has won the New Hampshire Democratic primary. After finishing fourth in South Carolina, the Michigan senator breaks through with his first primary victory in more familiar territory. Looking at the final results, Buttigieg narrowly edges out Gavin Newsom, who finishes second at 19.4%. Wes Moore takes third at 17.3%, firmly establishing himself within striking distance of the national leaders. All three will pick up delegates tonight, as the race remains incredibly tight heading into the next contests. Moving further down the results, Josh Shapiro lands in fourth place at 13.2%, just missing the 15% delegate threshold. Gretchen Whitmer finishes fifth at 10.3%, and Andy Beshear rounds out the top six at 7.1%. Strong performances, but not enough to claim statewide delegates. Looking at the lower tier finishers, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey places seventh at 6.0%. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly comes in at 3.4%, and the remaining candidates combine for just 1.6% of the votes. Now let's take a look at how the delegates shake out. Buttigieg leads the pack with 9 delegates, Newsom picks up 7, Moore takes 6, and Shapiro secures 2 from a strong enough district-level performance. That means Moore adds to his delegate lead, while Buttigieg scores a much-needed victory to stay in contention. Meanwhile, former Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer picks up her first delegate in these primaries. But this is just the first half of the night. The focus now moves west to Nevada, where a much different electorate could produce a much different result. Newsom has been the favorite there, but will he deliver? And can Buttigieg ride this momentum into another strong finish? We'll find out right after the break. All right, Election Pulse now projects that Gavin Newsom has won the Nevada Democratic primary. After placing second in South Carolina and again in New Hampshire, the California governor breaks through with his first primary victory, delivering a dominant performance in a state where his campaign had long expected him to do well. Take a look at these final projected results. Newsom wins decisively with 31.4% of the vote, finishing well ahead of Pete Buttigieg at 17.7% and Josh Shapiro at 14%. Shapiro falls just shy of the 15% delegate threshold, meaning only Newsom and Buttigieg will take a share of the statewide delegates tonight. Further down the leaderboard, one of the biggest surprises of the night, Wes Moore, fresh off his South Carolina victory, finishes at just 10.1%. His campaign hoped to expand its coalition in Nevada, but he'll leave the state empty-handed in the delegate race. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly follows at 8.7%, and Gretchen Whitmer finishes 6th at 7.5%. Rounding out the field, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear finishes at 6.0%, with drawn Colorado Governor Jared Polis at 1.3%, and all other candidates combine for 4.6%. With Nevada's notoriously slow count nearly complete, these results are locked in. Now here's how the delegate breakdown shakes out. Newsom secures 22 delegates, Buttigieg claims 9, and Shapiro picks up 5. This was a must-win for Newsom. With a strong second-place finish in New Hampshire and a big win here in Nevada, he's finally proving he can translate national polling strength into real votes. But the race is still wide open, and with more key contests ahead, anything can happen. All right, let's take a step back and look at where things stand after the first 3 contests. With results now in from South Carolina, New Hampshire, and Nevada, this race remains wide open, with 3 different winners and no clear frontrunner just yet. At the top of the delegate count is Gavin Newsom with 48 delegates thanks to his strong second-place finish in New Hampshire and a dominant victory in Nevada. Wes Moore follows with 32, buoyed by his South Carolina win, while Pete Buttigieg sits right behind at 31 after securing New Hampshire. Josh Shapiro, while still in the race, has 13 delegates after picking up small shares in multiple states. Further down, Gretchen Whitmer and Andy Beshear have 1 delegate each from district-level performances. With only 3% of total delegates awarded, this race is still in its early stages, and with 3 different candidates winning the first 3 states, there's no runaway leader.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Another shakeup in the Democratic primary. 2 more candidates are calling it quits. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly and Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey have officially suspended their campaigns, narrowing the field as the race heads toward its next critical phase. For Kelly, a former astronaut and swing state senator, the campaign never quite lifted off. Despite strong national name recognition, he struggled to carve out a distinct lane, and his distant finish in Nevada all but sealed his fate. Healey's road was even steeper. As a first-term governor with limited national exposure, she entered the race as a long shot and never found the breakout moment she needed. Her 6th-place finish in neighboring New Hampshire made it clear there was no viable path forward. All eyes turn to Michigan. The final test before Super Tuesday falls on Leap Day, February 29th, a make-or-break moment before nearly half of all delegates are awarded just over a week from now. For former Governor Gretchen Whitmer, this is a must-win. With just 1 delegate so far, her home state advantage is her best shot at staying in this race. But standing in her way, Michigan's junior U.S. Senator, Pete Buttigieg. For the rest of the field, Michigan is the last chance to gain momentum before the biggest day on the primary calendar. Newsom, Moore, and Buttigieg are locked in a tight battle, and a strong showing here could shift the race heading into Super Tuesday. We're just moments away from polls closing here in Michigan on this pivotal Leap Day primary. 3 contests down, one last battle before Super Tuesday. This is the moment for candidates to prove they can win in the industrial Midwest, where unions and working-class voters will have their say. Can Gretchen Whitmer defend her home turf and keep her campaign alive? Or does Pete Buttigieg deliver the final blow to her campaign in her own backyard? The wait is almost over. Michigan is about to speak. An election pulse can now make a projection in Michigan. Pete Buttigieg has won his home state's Democratic primary. The junior senator from Michigan delivers a decisive victory on familiar turf, notching his second primary win of the season and setting himself up as a major force heading into Super Tuesday. Take a look at these final projected results. Buttigieg takes the win with 25.0% of the votes, edging out former Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who finishes second at 21.8%. A loss on home soil is a devastating blow for Whitmer, who staked her campaign on a strong showing in Michigan. With Super Tuesday just days away, this could be the final nail in the coffin for her campaign. Meanwhile, Josh Shapiro surges into third place with 18.9%, a strong performance for the Pennsylvania governor. As a fellow Midwesterner, his appeal in Michigan was clear, allowing him to outpace both Gavin Newsom and Wes Moore for the first time in the race. Moore finishes fourth at 13.4%, just ahead of Newsom, who lands at 13.2%, a disappointing result for the national polling leader who had hoped for a stronger showing. Further down, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear rounds out the top 6 at 5.3%, missing the delegate threshold but continuing to register in key contests. Now here's how the delegate breakdown shakes out. Buttigieg claims the biggest haul with 42 delegates. Whitmer, despite the loss, secures 35, but it's a hollow victory for a campaign on the ropes. Shapiro picks up 26, his best delegate haul yet, further proving he's a growing force in the Midwest. Moore claims 8, holding steady, but losing ground, while Newsom collects just 5. And just like that, we have a new delegate leader. With his victory in Michigan, Pete Buttigieg overtakes Gavin Newsom at the top of the board, surging to 63 delegates. The California governor now finds himself trailing at 54, though with his home state's massive delegate haul still on the horizon. Meanwhile, Wes Moore, 40, Josh Shapiro, 39, and Gretchen Whitmer, 36, remain in the mix, as we have ourselves a 5-way fight heading into Super Tuesday. Now let's step back and look at the map. 4 states down, but the battle for the nomination is truly just beginning. Each major contender has staked a claim in different regions. Moore in the South, Buttigieg and Shapiro in the Midwest and Northeast, and Newsom in the West, but no one has taken full control. That could all change in just a few days. Super Tuesday looms large, where nearly half of all delegates will be awarded. From the South to the West Coast, from the Plains to New England, this is where frontrunners are made, or where campaigns come to an end. It's all on the line. Buckle up. Super Tuesday is next.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news here, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear is ending his presidential campaign and throwing his support behind Josh Shapiro. After struggling to carve out a clear lane in a field packed with moderate governors, Beshear is calling it quits just days before Super Tuesday. Despite a popular tenure in deep red Kentucky, his campaign never gained enough traction to compete with the frontrunners, with Gretchen Whitmer, Wes Moore, and Josh Shapiro all vying for a similar coalition of pragmatic Democrats. Beshear simply couldn't break through. He He made it official at a rally in Raleigh, North Carolina, one of Super Tuesday's biggest battlegrounds. Standing alongside Shapiro, Beshear praised the Pennsylvania governor's ability to win tough elections and bridge divides. For Shapiro, this is a major boost. With Beshear's endorsement, he strengthens his appeal across the South and Midwest, two critical regions on Super Tuesday. And with another candidate out of the running, only 5 remain. Super Tuesday is next. It's Super Tuesday, the biggest, most consequential day of the Democratic primary. 15 states and the territory of American Samoa are voting, shaping the course of this race in just a few hours' time. It's the single largest delegate haul of the calendar, a night that will define the rest of the primary. California, Texas, and North Carolina are the big prizes. Together, these 3 states control a massive 784 delegates, nearly 20% of all available throughout the cycle. Pete Buttigieg enters as the delegate leader, sitting at 63 after his Michigan triumph. Gavin Newsom trails at 54, but with his home state of California on the board, tonight could be his moment to take control. Josh Shapiro, riding a last-second endorsement from Andy Beshear, is hoping to break through, while Wes Moore looks to prove his early momentum can carry him through the marathon of Super Tuesday. And for Gretchen Whitmer, this is survival mode. After losing her home state, she's searching for a foothold to keep her campaign alive. Take a look here as the latest national polling averages show no clear frontrunner. Gavin Newsom holds the top spot at 26%, but Pete Buttigieg isn't far behind at 21%. Josh Shapiro, coming off strong performances in Michigan and with fresh momentum from Andy Beshear's endorsement, now polls at 18%. Wes Moore sits at 15%, while Gretchen Whitmer rounds out the top 5 at 13%. Every candidate still standing has picked up support as others have dropped out. But what's striking, no one has taken control. The party is as divided as ever, and the question looming over Democrats today: does someone finally break away, or does this race stay locked in a multi-way battle all the way to the convention? This is the moment to prove who can win over a national coalition. 15 states, hundreds of delegates, and a party looking for direction. Super Tuesday is here, and it's about to get real. Here we go. Virginia and Vermont close first at 7, followed by North Carolina at 7:30. From there, the floodgates open. A wave of states will report results at 8 and 9 p.m. before the final polls close at 11 in California and American Samoa. Newsom will be watching that final window closely. His campaign is banking on a dominant night in his home state to catapult him back to the top of the board. The race is wide open, but not for long. Super Tuesday is underway, and the battle for delegates starts right now. An election pulse can now make a projection in Virginia. Josh Shapiro has won the Old Dominion. The Pennsylvania governor claims his first primary victory of the season, delivering a major win on the East Coast, and proving his Midwest strength translates further south. Take a look at the final results. Shapiro tops the field with 26.7% of the vote, pulling ahead of Wes Moore, who finishes second at 23.6% after a strong showing with black voters. Gavin Newsom lands in third at 19.5%, keeping himself in the mix, but still searching for a dominant win outside of Nevada. Further down, Pete Buttigieg finishes fourth at 16.9%, Whitmer follows with 10.2%, and the rest of the field combines for just over 3% of the votes. And now, the delegate breakdown. Shapiro takes the biggest haul with 34 delegates, Moore follows with 30, Newsom secures 21, and Buttigieg picks up 14. A big win for Shapiro, but there's no time to celebrate, because we have another projection. Take a look at this. Election Pulse has called the race in Vermont for Pete Buttigieg. The Michigan senator notches his third primary victory and his second in New England, reinforcing his strength among college-educated liberals and suburban voters in this part of the country. Here are the numbers. Buttigieg finishes first with 30.8%, narrowly edging out Newsom, who lands at 28.0%. Another strong showing, but not quite enough to secure the win. Gretchen Whitmer places third at 14.5%, her best performance outside of Michigan so far. After underperforming in the first few contests, this is a glimmer of hope for the former governor, but it may be too little, too late. Wes Moore finishes fourth at 13.7%. He was expected to perform better in the Northeast, but his campaign still hasn't found a foothold in whiter, rural states like Vermont. And what a night for Shapiro so far. First place in Virginia, but dead last here among the major candidates at just 9.2%, a reminder that his appeal still has limits in parts of the country. Here's how the delegates shake out. Buttigieg and Newsom split the lion's share, taking 7 delegates each, while Whitmer and Moore both grab 1. That's 2 contests down, and we're just getting started. The 7:30 closings are coming up. North Carolina is next. Stay with us. So the first results of the night are in. Josh Shapiro takes Virginia, securing his first primary victory and potentially setting the stage for a broader consolidation of the moderate wing behind his candidacy. Meanwhile, Pete Buttigieg notches his third win of the season in Vermont, and thereby holding on to his delegate lead, albeit more narrowly over Gavin Newsom, who now only trails Buttigieg by 2 delegates at 82 to 84 after finishing ahead of Buttigieg in Virginia and picking up an identical delegate total in Vermont. Meanwhile, Shapiro's win in Virginia propels him up to 73 delegates, ahead of Wes Moore for the first time this cycle, who sits at 71. Gretchen Whitmer, despite a stronger-than-expected performance in Vermont, remains further back at 37. And keep this in mind, this is just the beginning. Only 9% of delegates have been awarded, and there's still a long road ahead. But in such a tightly contested race, every delegate matters. Up next, North Carolina, a key battleground state with 134 delegates on the line and a diverse electorate that could shake up the standings once again. Who takes it? We'll find out after the break. Here we go. Election Pulse is ready to make a projection. Josh Shapiro has won the North Carolina Democratic primary, a massive win for the Pennsylvania governor in one of Super Tuesday's biggest battlegrounds, further cementing his rise as a major contender in this race. Let's break down the numbers. Shapiro leads the field with 28.6% of the vote, his message clearly resonating with suburban and moderate voters across the Tar Heel state. Gavin Newsom takes second at 23.1%, holding steady but still searching for a decisive breakthrough. Wes Moore finishes third at 20.9%, another strong showing among black voters, but once again just short of the top spot. Further down, Pete Buttigieg's struggles continue in the South, landing in fourth at 14.0%. Gretchen Whitmer rounds out the top 5 at 10.2%, managing to scrape up a few delegates, but unable to expand her appeal beyond her home region. The rest of the field barely registers as the race increasingly becomes a battle between the top contenders. Now take a look at the delegate breakdown. Shapiro walks away with the biggest prize, 41 delegates. Newsom takes 31, Moore secures 29, Buttigieg picks up 12, and then finally Whitmer nabs 3. That's back-to-back wins for Shapiro tonight, and his biggest yet. A clear sign that his momentum isn't just real, it's growing. But Super Tuesday is far from over, and with major delegate-rich states still to come, this race is nowhere near settled. More results ahead. Stay with us. As we take a look over Nashville, Tennessee, where polls are set to close at the top of the hour, let's check in on where things stand after the first wave of results. Josh Shapiro is the big winner so far tonight, securing victories in both Virginia and North Carolina, his first two primary wins of the cycle, and launching himself into the delegate lead with 114. Gavin Newsom sits just behind at 113, keeping this race razor thin. Wes Moore crosses into triple digits with 100 delegates, while Pete Buttigieg holds at 96 after a fourth-place finish in North Carolina. Gretchen Whitmer remains further back at 40, but this night is far from over. Polls in Alabama, Maine, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, and Tennessee are all closing at the top of the hour, bringing in another massive wave of results. And looming ahead, California and Texas. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the battle for the nomination is only getting more intense. We have some projections coming in right now. An election pulse can now project a landslide in Alabama. Wes Moore dominates in the Deep South. The Maryland governor delivers his most decisive win yet, capturing 36% of the vote and flexing his strength among black voters. This is the kind of statement victory his campaign needed, a powerful answer to any doubts about his staying power in this race. Meanwhile, Josh Shapiro surges into second place at 25.6%, another strong showing for the Pennsylvania governor in a state that has historically favored moderate candidates. Gavin Newsom lands in third at 16.9%, failing to gain traction in a state that was never expected to be a stronghold for him. Further down, Pete Buttigieg stumbles yet again in the South, finishing at just 7.1%, shut out of delegates in yet another Southern primary. Gretchen Whitmer takes fourth at 10.6%, another subpar performance that leaves her campaign searching for answers. In the all-important delegate haul, Moore takes 24 delegates, Shapiro follows with 16, and Newsom secures 10. Whitmer barely scrapes out 2, a small consolation on an otherwise tough night. A commanding win for Moore, proving he remains a major force in this race. But no time to dwell. We have another projection. Take a look at this. Election Pulse now projects that Gavin Newsom has won the Maine Democratic primary. The California governor finally gets on the board tonight, pulling in 28.4% of the votes in a state that aligns well with his brand of progressive politics. Newsom narrowly holds off Pete Buttigieg, who comes less than 2 points of a third win in New England. Wes Moore lands in third at 16.8%, showing some resilience despite the state's overwhelmingly white electorate. And look at this, Josh Shapiro clocks in at 14.3%, his best New England showing yet. Gretchen Whitmer, however, continues to struggle outside the Midwest, finishing last among major contenders at just over 10%. Another missed opportunity, another lost delegate battle, and speaking of delegates, Newsom secures 9 with the win, but Buttigieg still manages to add 8 to his growing total, while Moore grabs 4 and Shapiro picks up 3. A much-needed momentum boost for Newsom, but no time to celebrate because we've got a stunner in Massachusetts. Here we go. Wes Moore takes Massachusetts. This was far from a given for the Maryland governor, but he ekes out the victory, winning 26.3% of the vote in the most diverse state in the Northeast with a strong progressive base. But take a look at how tight this race was. Michigan Senator Pete Buttigieg finishes a razor-thin second at 25%, continuing his consistent strength in New England, where he has routinely hovered between 25 and 30% in these primary contests. Gavin Newsom rounds out the top 3 at 19.4%, a solid performance, but still short of the breakthrough he's looking for outside the West. Meanwhile, Josh Shapiro finishes 4th at 15.7%, not his worst showing, and just enough to ensure he secures a share of the Commonwealth's 92 delegates. Gretchen Whitmer, once again, lands at just over 10%, frustratingly short of the threshold. Now let's look at the all-important delegate count. Moore picks up 31, Buttigieg follows right behind with 30, Newsom secures 19, and Shapiro takes 12. Another massive moment for Moore, but can he keep the momentum rolling? Let's head to Oklahoma. And now, Election Pulse can project that Josh Shapiro has won the Oklahoma Democratic primary. The Pennsylvania governor continues his strong Super Tuesday performance, pulling off a victory in the Sooner state with 27.4% of the votes. While Oklahoma isn't a traditional battleground for Democrats, its mix of urban, suburban, and rural voters provides an interesting test of coalition building. And tonight, Shapiro passed with flying colors. Take a look at these final numbers. Shapiro claims first place, while Gavin Newsom lands in second at 26.0%, just a few points behind. Wes Moore registers yet another top three finish at 19.6%. Further down, Pete Buttigieg secures fourth place with 15.9%. Another solid finish for the Michigan senator, but once again he's struggling to win outside of the Northeast and Midwest. Gretchen Whitmer rounds out the top five at 9%. And here's how the delegates break down. Shapiro and Newsom both secure 12 delegates each, while Moore picks up 7 and Buttigieg claims 5. A key takeaway here, Shapiro continues to prove his appeal isn't just regional. He's now won primaries in the South, the Midwest, and the Plains, building the kind of broad coalition that could make him a real threat in the long haul. And finally, EP can also call the race in Tennessee for the governor. Shapiro takes his fourth state of the night. A huge win for the Pennsylvania governor, who continues his dominant Super Tuesday performance, carrying 29.0% of the vote in a key southern battleground. With wins now in Virginia, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Tennessee, Shapiro is proving that his brand of pragmatic, Midwestern-style politics resonates across regions. Here's how the numbers shake out. Wes Moore finishes second at 24.8%, securing another strong showing in the South, but falling short of victory. Gavin Newsom takes third at 21.3%, keeping himself in the mix, but still lacking a defining win outside of Nevada and Maine. Further down, Pete Buttigieg places fourth with 12.1%, a respectable finish, but not enough to pick up major delegates. Gretchen Whitmer follows at 9.7%, once again missing the statewide delegate threshold. And now the delegate haul. Shapiro takes 24, Moore follows with 19, and Newsom picks up 15. Buttigieg secures 5 delegates from district-level performances, but the rest of the field is shut out. This is a live look inside the Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C., where the tension is rising as results continue to pour in from across the country. So far tonight, 8 states have been called, 7 more to go, plus the caucuses ongoing in American Samoa. And take a look at this. Wes Moore has reclaimed the delegate lead for the first time since his South Carolina victory. He now sits at 185 delegates, narrowly ahead of Josh Shapiro at 181 and Gavin Newsom at 178. Pete Buttigieg holds at 144, still in the mix, while Gretchen Whitmer remains stuck at 42. A number that all but seals the fate of her campaign. What was once a bid bursting with potential now looks like it's reaching its end. At just 19% of delegates awarded, this race is still wide open, but the pressure is mounting. Every delegate, every contest matters. And up next, Arkansas, a southern battleground, 40 delegates up for grabs. Can Moore extend his lead? Can Shapiro or Newsom close the gap? Polls are closing in just minutes. Stay with us. Election Pulse can now project that Josh Shapiro has won the Arkansas Democratic primary. The Pennsylvania governor captures his 5th victory of the night, continuing his Super Tuesday surge after coming in without a single win. His moderate appeal plays well in Arkansas, a state that has long favored centrist Democrats, and it's clear that Andy Beshear's endorsement is paying dividends in border states like this one. Let's take a look at the final results. Shapiro finishes first with 29.1% of the vote, delivering another strong performance in the South. Wes Moore places second at 26.3%, continuing to prove his strength with black voters and in the region overall. And Gretchen Whitmer surprises in third at 15.8%, her best performance of the night so far. Further down the list, Gavin Newsom lands in fourth at just 14.2%. Pete Buttigieg comes in at 10.3%, unable to gain traction here, and the rest of the field barely registers. Now let's break down the delegates. Shapiro takes 13 delegates, Moore follows with 11, and Whitmer picks up 5. Newsom walks away with just 2 delegates, while Buttigieg is shut out entirely. The 9 p.m. closings are next with a massive wave of states, including Texas and Minnesota. Buckle up, we're just getting started. Super Tuesday rolls on, and so far one candidate is making the most of the night. Josh Shapiro, who came into today without a single primary win, has now racked up 5 victories, vaulting himself into the top tier of this race. Take a look at the delegate count. Wes Moore holds on to a razor-thin lead at 196, with Shapiro right behind at 194, and Gavin Newsom lurking at 180. Pete Buttigieg remains at 144, still in striking distance, while Gretchen Whitmer raises her count to 47 after picking up 5 more delegates in Arkansas. But here's the real story. The biggest prizes of the night are still up for grabs. We've seen 529 delegates awarded so far, but Texas and California alone will account for 668 more. The trajectory of this race could look completely different in just a couple of hours. And for Newsom, this is where he's counting on a surge. He's been the favorite in both Texas and his home state of California. But will he deliver? 4 more states are closing their polls at the top of the hour here at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Minnesota, Colorado, Iowa, and Texas. This next wave could shake up the race yet again. The biggest night of the primary season is far from over. Stay with us. Election Pulse can now make a projection in Colorado. Gavin Newsom has won the Centennial State. After a string of near misses earlier in the night, the California governor's breakthrough comes in a state with a tendency to back the most progressive candidate in the race. Newsom takes the win with 30.2% of the vote, holding off Wes Moore, who lands in second at 23.3%, a solid result for the Maryland governor. Pete Buttigieg secures third place at 19.6%, also a strong showing in a state that favors the kind of suburban and college-educated voters who have powered his campaign so far. Further down, Josh Shapiro places fourth at 15.9%, which seems to be right around his floor across different regions this evening, while Gretchen Whitmer follows in a familiar 5th place at 8.3%. Now let's take a look at the delegate breakdown. Newsom grabs 28 delegates, Moore follows with 19, Buttigieg picks up 15, and Shapiro secures 10. This is a pivotal moment for Newsom, and with his home state of California still ahead. But first, take a look at this here, as Election Pulse can now project that Pete Buttigieg has won the Iowa Democratic primary. It's a homecoming of sorts for the Michigan senator who once shocked the political world with a win in Iowa back in 2020. Now 8 years later, he does it again, securing another victory in the Hawkeye State and proving his appeal still resonates with rural and Midwestern voters. Buttigieg finishes first with 29.5% of the votes, his first win of the night. Gretchen Whitmer surges into second place at 24.8%, delivering her best finish outside of Michigan. And Josh Shapiro rounds out the top 3 at 23.6%, continuing his strong performance in the Midwest. Further down, Gavin Newsom places fourth at 12.1%, barely scraping onto the delegate board in a state that was never expected to be his strongest. Wes Moore, meanwhile, struggles mightily here, finishing at just 7.2%, one of his weakest performances of the night. Now let's break down the delegates. Buttigieg takes 16, Whitmer follows closely with 12, Shapiro secures 11, and Newsom picks up just 1. It's a big, if not necessary, moment for Buttigieg, but as we've seen all night, no one is running away with this thing. And we have another projection. Election Pulse calls the Minnesota Democratic primary for Gavin Newsom. the California governor secures his third win of the night, carrying a state that often favors progressive candidates. This is a crucial pickup for Newsom, who has been searching for momentum outside the West Coast and finally finds it in the North Star State. But Gretchen Whitmer delivers another impressive showing, finishing second at 23.4%. That's two strong performances in a row for the former Michigan governor. Josh Shapiro rounds out the top three at 19.5%, continuing his steady accumulation of delegates across the board. Further down, Pete Buttigieg takes fourth at 17.0%, a respectable finish, but not enough to break into the top tier. And Wes Moore struggles again in a state with a smaller black electorate, landing at 11.6%. It's been a rough stretch for Moore, whose early delegate lead is slipping away as the race moves into less favorable territory. Now let's talk delegates. Newsom secures 25 delegates, Whitmer picks up 21, Shapiro takes 16, and Buttigieg adds 13 to his total. But now all eyes turn to Texas, 228 delegates, the biggest prize of the night so far. Who takes it? We're about to find out. And here we go. Election Pulse can now make a call in Texas. We project that Gavin Newsom has won the Democratic primary. The California governor delivers his biggest victory of the night, carrying the Lone Star State with a commanding 28.9% of the vote and securing the largest delegate prize of Super Tuesday so far. Let's take a look at these numbers. Newsom finishes first with over 1.1 million votes, a decisive win that helps him reclaim his footing in the delegate race. Josh Shapiro takes second at 24.1%, another strong showing as he continues to consolidate support across the South and Midwest. And Wes Moore rounds out the top three with 19.0%, proving once again that his coalition remains strong in diverse, high-population states. Further down, Pete Buttigieg lands in fourth at 13.7%, a weaker than hoped performance in such a delegate-rich state. Gretchen Whitmer follows at 11.4%, struggling to gain traction in a state far from her home base. And here's how the massive delegate haul shakes out. Newsom secures a whopping 89 delegates. Shapiro picks up 78, Moore takes 50, Buttigieg grabs 16, and Whitmer manages 11 to keep her campaign breathing. This is a huge moment for Newsom. Texas was the state he had been eyeing all night, a win he needed, and with it, he narrowly retakes the overall delegate lead. We're heading into the final stretch of the night. Still ahead, Utah, California, and American Samoa. Now here's how the race stands as we head into the final stretch of Super Tuesday. Gavin Newsom is back on top. After major wins in Texas, Minnesota, and Colorado, the California governor has retaken the delegate lead he entered the night with. He now stands at 323 delegates, with Josh Shapiro close behind at 309. Pete Buttigieg, once a co-frontrunner, has faded into the background. After a strong start in early states, he now finds himself at 204 delegates, more than 100 behind both Newsom and Shapiro. He remains competitive, but will need a major comeback to stay viable. And what about Wes Moore? He sits at 265 delegates, still in the mix, but facing a major challenge ahead. His southern strength carried him through early states, but as the map shifts west, his momentum is slowing. Unless he can pull off a surprise in California or Utah, his path forward becomes much more difficult. Now only 3 contests remain: Utah, California, and American Samoa. Newsom has long pulled ahead in both Utah and his home state of California, while Buttigieg is expected to finish second in both. For Moore, the numbers aren't promising. He's projected to finish dead last in both states, making this next hour a critical moment for his campaign. Utah is up next, 26 delegates at stake. We'll be back with the results right after the break. And now, Election Pulse can make a projection. In Utah, Gavin Newsom takes the Beehive State. A commanding victory for the California governor, his fifth of the night, as he solidifies his hold on the progressive wing of the party. Utah, the youngest and most highly educated electorate of any state Donald Trump carried back in 2024, was always expected to lean Newsom's way, and tonight it delivers him another crucial delegate boost. Take a look at these final results. Newsom wins decisively with 35.9% of the vote, extending his western stronghold after victories in Colorado and Minnesota. Pete Buttigieg secures second place at 19.4%, a much-needed result after fading in recent contests. And Josh Shapiro rounds out the top three at 16.3%, continuing his steady delegate accumulation but failing to seriously challenge Newsom in the West. Further down the leaderboard, no surprises, Gretchen Whitmer lands in fourth place with 11.2%, while Wes Moore struggles again, finishing in fifth at just 10.3%, his second lowest result of the night. And now the all-important delegate breakdown. Newsom takes the lion's share with 14 delegates, further extending his lead over Shapiro. Buttigieg collects 9 delegates, while Shapiro adds 7, keeping himself within striking distance heading into the final major contest of the evening. And now all eyes turn to the biggest prize of the night, California. With over 400 delegates to award, California will shape the final Super Tuesday tally. Polls are set to close in just under an hour. Don't go anywhere. We are fast approaching the biggest moment of the night. Gavin Newsom has extended his delegate lead after his win in Utah, but Super Tuesday's largest prize still lies ahead. California isn't just another contest, it's a Democratic powerhouse with an estimated 7 million votes expected in tonight's primary. A state this massive demands serious resources, and Newsom has spent heavily on TV ads, ground operations, and voter outreach. The question now, will it pay off? Polls have consistently shown Newsom leading, with Buttigieg in second, but margin matters. With 424 delegates at stake, California could reshape the entire race. By the end of the next hour, more than 40% of all delegates will have been awarded. For Josh Shapiro and Wes Moore, the challenge is damage control. Neither has polled competitively here, and Moore's limited resources have kept him off the airwaves, but strong district-level performances could still keep them in contention. And don't forget, American Samoa is also wrapping up. 4 years ago, Jason Palmer shocked the political world by defeating President Biden there. Could we see another surprise tonight? The biggest hour of Super Tuesday is here. California results are coming in soon. Stay with us. And here it is. Election Pulse can now project that Gavin Newsom has won the California Democratic primary. No surprise here, the home state governor cruises to victory in the biggest contest of the night, delivering a commanding performance in a race he was always favored to win. Take a look at these final projected results. Newsom secures a dominant 40.6% of the vote, far ahead of the field. Pete Buttigieg finishes second at 21.4%, a strong showing but nowhere close enough to challenge the California governor on his home turf. Josh Shapiro rounds out the top three at 12.9%, picking up some support but falling well short of a breakthrough. Further down, Gretchen Whitmer lands fourth at 11%, Wes Moore follows at just 9.8%, and the remaining candidates fail to make a significant impact. Tough night for Moore. Despite his national wins, his campaign simply lacked the resources to compete in a state of this scale. Now take a look at the delegate haul. Newsom racks up a massive 265 delegates, the biggest single state prize of the entire primary. Buttigieg claims 122, keeping himself afloat in the race. Shapiro secures 21, Whitmer adds 10, and finally Moore picks up just 6. With that, Newsom not only cements his status as the clear frontrunner, but also builds a delegate lead that will be difficult to overcome. But we're not done yet. Election Pulse can also project that Gavin Newsom has won the Democratic caucuses in American Samoa. A small contest, but another win on the board as the night comes to a close. And with that, Super Tuesday is in the books. The biggest night of the primary season has reshaped the race, but it's far from over. Approximately 42% of all delegates have now been awarded, and Gavin Newsom leads the field with 605 delegates, nearly double that of his next closest competitor. Josh Shapiro sits at 338, locked in a tight battle with Pete Buttigieg, who holds 335. Maryland Governor Wes Moore follows with 271, while former Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer remains in a distant fifth with 103. Take a look at the updated primary map. 19 states down, 31 to go. The leader, Gavin Newsom, has carried California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Texas, Minnesota, and the caucuses in American Samoa, capitalizing on his strength in progressive Western states. Josh Shapiro has secured wins across key border states, claiming victories in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. Pete Buttigieg's biggest win came in Michigan, but he's also reclaimed Iowa and secured victories in New England, carrying both Vermont and New Hampshire. Wes Moore, meanwhile, has added Massachusetts to his column, alongside two Deep South strongholds, South Carolina and Alabama. Next up, Hawaii, a Saturday primary that will keep the momentum rolling before we head into the next major primary night. 4 more states vote next Tuesday: Washington, Idaho, Mississippi, and a crucial battleground in Georgia.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news, former Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer is suspending her presidential campaign after a disappointing Super Tuesday performance left her with no viable path to the nomination. Despite early promise and strong name recognition, Whitmer struggled to establish herself among the frontrunners. Her campaign staked everything on Michigan, but after losing her home state to Senator Pete Buttigieg, the writing was on the wall. Heading into Super Tuesday, Whitmer remained competitive in the delegate race. Yet while she managed to notch competitive showings in a handful of states, she fell significantly behind the leaders. After finishing the night with just 103 delegates, more than 500 behind California Governor Gavin Newsom, Whitmer has decided to step aside. For now, Whitmer has declined to endorse any of the remaining candidates. However, sources close to her campaign say she has been in discussions with Josh Shapiro, fueling speculation that she could throw her support behind the Pennsylvania governor in the coming days. Her exit reshapes the field yet again. Just 4 candidates remain. The race moves forward. It's Saturday, March 11th, and the results of the Hawaii Democratic primary are just seconds away. This state has a strong progressive streak. Bernie Sanders dominated here in 2016 and pulled in over a third of the vote in 2020, even after dropping out. The polls have closed, the votes are in, and we're about to find out. Hawaii is ready to make its choice. And here we go. Election Pulse can project that Gavin Newsom has won the Hawaii Democratic primary. No surprise here, the California governor adds another victory to his growing tally, extending his Super Tuesday momentum deep into the Pacific. Take a look at these final results. Newsom carries Hawaii with 36.3% of the votes. Pete Buttigieg finishes second at 20.5%, followed by Wes Moore in third at 19.4%, once again proving his ability to compete in diverse electorates. Further down, Josh Shapiro secures fourth place with 16.7%, struggling to break through in a state less favorable to his moderate coalition. Gretchen Whitmer, who remained on the ballot, lands at just 5.8%, a distant fifth as her former supporters begin shifting elsewhere. And now, here's how the delegates shake out. Newsom claims the biggest share with 10 delegates, Buttigieg picks up 5, Moore follows with 4, and Shapiro secures 3. Another win for Newsom, another key test passed. Here's where things stand after Hawaii. Gavin Newsom continues to build on his Super Tuesday momentum, now sitting at 615 delegates, far ahead of his closest competitors. Josh Shapiro and Pete Buttigieg remain in a close battle for second place, with Shapiro at 341 and Buttigieg just behind at 340. Meanwhile, Wes Moore, despite key wins in the South, is falling further behind at 275 delegates. And while Gretchen Whitmer remains on the board at 103 delegates, she has exited the race, leaving her supporters up for grabs. But there's no time to pause, because up next, 4 more states vote on Tuesday, including a major battleground in Georgia. The race is far from over. Stay with us. Now the focus shifts to Super Tuesday 2. 5 states, plus Democrats abroad and the Northern Mariana Islands, are awarding over 300 delegates tonight. For Shapiro or Buttigieg, the time to break away is now. If neither can separate themselves, Newsom's march to the nomination will only grow stronger. Meanwhile, Moore is running on fumes. His campaign is low on cash, low on TV ads, and low on staff in key states. But he remains committed, at least for now. If he struggles again tonight, expect the pressure to mount for him to step aside. And then there's Georgia, the biggest prize of the night, a crucial general election battleground. A strong performance here won't just boost a candidate's delegate count, it'll fuel electability arguments heading into the next wave of contests. The latest national polling averages show Newsom stretching his lead to its widest point yet, now pulling in 30% support. But his rise is largely a reflection of his dominant Super Tuesday performance, consolidating support through sheer momentum rather than a direct transfer of Whitmer voters. The biggest beneficiary of Whitmer's exit, Josh Shapiro. He surges to 23%, overtaking Pete Buttigieg, 21%, for the first time, a shift likely driven by the favorability numbers he enjoyed among Whitmer's supporters. Wes Moore follows closely at 18%, continuing his slow but steady rise into the top tier of contenders. And with that, Super Tuesday 2 begins now. The first polls close at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, right after the break. Here we go. Super Tuesday 2 is officially underway. Polls are about to close across 5 states and 2 territories, with Georgia as the biggest battleground of the night. Over 300 delegates are at stake, and with Newsom out front, Shapiro, Buttigieg, and Moore are in a fight to keep pace. The first projection is coming in right now. And we have a projection. Wes Moore has won the Georgia Democratic primary. The Maryland governor picks up a huge win in a critical battleground, carrying the state on the strength of overwhelming support from black voters, the very coalition that propelled Joe Biden to victory here in both the primary and general election in 2020. Moore takes first place with 30.4% of the vote, holding off Josh Shapiro, who finishes just behind at 28.0% after performing strongly among suburban moderates and rural Democrats across the state. Gavin Newsom lands in third at 21.3%, struggling once again in the South, but still enough for another strong delegate share. Further down, Pete Buttigieg continues to stumble in southern primaries, finishing fourth at 13.4%, with little inroads among black voters. Gretchen Whitmer, despite suspending her campaign, still records 5.6% of the vote. Now let's talk delegates. Moore claims the biggest share with 38 delegates, Shapiro follows closely with 34, and Buttigieg takes 10 despite another disappointing showing. This is a massive win for Moore, keeping him in the game when his campaign desperately needed it. His path forward remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: he's not going anywhere yet, and we are just getting started. More results ahead. Stay with us. Take a look at this. Election Pulse has called the race in Mississippi for Wes Moore. Another big Southern win for the Maryland governor as he once again dominates in a state where black voters make up the backbone of the Democratic electorate. But the big question remains, can he translate this momentum out west? Moore takes first place with 36.0% of the vote, carrying key urban centers and high turnout black precincts. Josh Shapiro follows at 28.9%, continuing to perform well with rural and suburban moderates. Gavin Newsom lands in third at 19.0%, a respectable showing, but another reminder that winning over black voters remains a concern for the California governor. Further down, Pete Buttigieg falters again, finishing at 10.6%, while Gretchen Whitmer still records 4.2% of the vote. And with that, Moore adds 16 delegates to his total, strengthening his position in the race. Shapiro picks up 12, keeping his momentum alive. Newsom takes 7, staying in the mix despite struggling in the South. That's 2 states down, but the night is far from over. The next set of states are Idaho and Washington, along with the Northern Mariana Islands, and the Democrats' a broad vote, all 4 of which are expected to go Newsom's way. More results coming in soon. All right, Election Pulse now projects that Gavin Newsom has won the Idaho Democratic primary. The progressive wing flexes its muscle in this traditionally conservative state as Newsom rides strong support from college towns, younger voters, and left-leaning rural pockets to a commanding victory. This result tracks closely with previous contests here. Bernie Sanders won Idaho in a landslide in 2016 and ran well in 2020, underscoring the lasting presence of progressive politics within the state's Democratic electorate. Now let's take a look at the final results. Newsom wins big with 39.6% of the vote, proving that his brand of politics still resonates in deep red states with activist-driven Democratic bases. Pete Buttigieg finishes second at 24.5%, boosted by urban and suburban moderates who might have otherwise leaned toward Josh Shapiro. Speaking of Shapiro, he lands in third at 19.3%, failing to crack 20% but still picking up delegates. Further down, Wes Moore struggles yet again in the West, finishing at just 9.4%. His campaign has focused heavily on the South, and it shows. His numbers drop off dramatically in states like Idaho. Here's the delegate breakdown. Newsom takes 11 delegates, extending his national lead. Buttigieg picks up 7, while Shapiro secures 5, keeping both candidates in the conversation. Moore, however, walks away empty-handed, missing the viability threshold. We also have a projection in Washington where we can yet again call Gavin Newsom the winner. If there was any doubt before, Newsom now owns the West. The California governor cruises to victory in Washington, a state that has long been a progressive stronghold. Just as Bernie Sanders carried it in 2016 and overperformed in 2020, Newsom follows the same playbook, winning big with younger voters, urban progressives, and the Seattle metro area. Here's how the final numbers stack up. Newsom secures first place with 35.0%. Pete Buttigieg finishes second at 25.8%, bolstered by well-educated suburban voters in places like Bellevue and Spokane. It's one of his strongest showings of the night, as he continues to battle Josh Shapiro for the role of the anti-Newsom alternative. Shapiro lands in third at 18.3%, struggling to gain traction in a state where progressive policies reign supreme. Further down, Wes Moore falls to fourth at 14.6%, another sign that his southern firewall isn't holding up as the race moves west. Meanwhile, Gretchen Whitmer, despite exiting the race, still pulls in nearly 5%, evidence that some of her coalition has yet to fully shift to another candidate. Now the delegate breakdown, Newsom takes the largest haul, winning 35 delegates, further solidifying his frontrunner status. Buttigieg picks up 25, another much-needed boost for his campaign out west. Shapiro claims 19, keeping him in the mix, and Moore secures 13, but with each passing contest, his path to the nomination looks increasingly slim. And before we go, Election Pulse can make a projection in the Democrats' abroad primary. This global contest has long favored progressives, with Bernie Sanders winning big here in 2016 and 2020. Now Gavin Newsom follows that trend. We can also project the winner of the caucuses in the Northern Mariana Islands as Gavin Newsom, a small contest but a meaningful one. Newsom's West Coast ties and strong support among younger, left-leaning Democrats likely helped push him over the top. And with that, Super Tuesday 2 is in the books. Gavin Newsom extends his delegate lead after a commanding performance in the West, sweeping Idaho, Washington, Democrats abroad, and the Northern Mariana Islands. His progressive coalition, anchored by younger voters and West Coast liberals, keeps him firmly in control of this race. Josh Shapiro, despite strong showings in Georgia and Mississippi, leaves the night without a single win. He needed a breakthrough moment, and it didn't come. But next week could be different. Florida, Ohio, Illinois, and Arizona, all states where Newsom has looked less dominant, offer him a chance to shift the race. The problem? To make a real dent, he might need a clearer path, and right now the field remains crowded. Pete Buttigieg, meanwhile, continues to hold steady in third at 388 delegates. His second place finishes out west were respectable. But once again, he failed to notch a key victory. He's been competitive everywhere but dominant nowhere, and unless that changes, his campaign could soon be stuck in neutral. And then there's Wes Moore, his southern firewall held with wins in Georgia and Mississippi, cementing his grip on black voters. But beyond that, he's still struggling to expand his reach. At 342 delegates, he remains in the mix, but time is running short for him to make up ground. So, what happens next? Does someone else join Whitmer on the sidelines? Do Shapiro or Buttigieg make a move? Next Tuesday is the second biggest night of the primary season. If a shift is coming in this race, it has to happen there. We'll see you then.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news, Pete Buttigieg is out. The Michigan senator is ending his campaign, but not leaving the race quietly. He's throwing his support behind Josh Shapiro in a major shakeup ahead of next week's decisive primaries. Buttigieg's exit comes just days before a critical test in the Midwest, where states like Ohio and Illinois will determine whether Newsom can lock this race down or if Shapiro can mount a comeback. The endorsement is a clear attempt to consolidate the moderate lane and slow Newsom's march to the nomination. Appearing alongside Shapiro in Ohio, Buttigieg made the case for unity, calling Shapiro the best candidate to bring people together and win in November. For Shapiro, this is the moment he's been waiting for. The question now is whether it's enough. Meanwhile, Wes Moore, the Maryland governor, has announced he's pausing campaign events and travel, effectively freezing his campaign while deciding his next steps. His struggles outside the South have fueled calls to drop out. But unlike Buttigieg, Moore isn't ready to make that call yet. He's not endorsing anyone either, leaving the door open for what comes next. For Shapiro, that means the Buttigieg endorsement may not be enough unless Moore follows suit. For Newsom, the field is still split, but for how much longer? A defining night is just ahead. The Midwest takes center stage next Tuesday. The stage is set. Super Tuesday 3 is here. 5 states, 603 delegates. A turning point in the Democratic primary. Gavin Newsom enters the night with a commanding lead, his West Coast strength carrying him through the last wave of contests. But now the map shifts, and at the center of it all, Florida. The biggest delegate prize of the night. 224 delegates at stake, and the most unpredictable race yet. For the past week, Newsom and Shapiro have been neck and neck in the Sunshine State, setting up a must-win battle that could redefine the race. But that's just the beginning. Arizona is in play. Shapiro has surged in the Grand Canyon state, making it a far tougher fight for Newsom than expected. If he can pull off an upset here, it's a sign this race is far from over. Then there's the Midwest, Ohio, Illinois, and Kansas, where Shapiro is looking to capitalize on Buttigieg's departure and claim the moderate lane outright. And what about Wes Moore? His campaign is still running, but just barely. No travel, no events, no new ads. He insists he's staying in, but tonight could be the moment that forces a decision. It's all on the line. Newsom could all but seal the deal. Shapiro could pull off a comeback. In Florida, that could change everything. It starts now. Here we go. Super Tuesday 3 is upon us. 5 states, 603 delegates, the biggest night since Super Tuesday itself. Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Kansas, and Ohio. Shapiro is counting on a big night to get himself back in the race. The clock is ticking. The first polls close in Ohio right now. All right, Election Pulse can project that Josh Shapiro has won the Ohio Democratic primary. A major victory for the Pennsylvania governor. Shapiro needed a statement win tonight, and he gets it here in the Buckeye State. A state with deep union ties, a strong working-class electorate, and a large swath of suburban moderates. This is Shapiro's lane, and he delivers. And take a look at the margins. 39% of the votes, nearly 300,000 more votes than his closest rival. And let's not forget, this is where Shapiro stood side by side with Pete Buttigieg just days ago, securing a crucial endorsement. It seems to have paid off. But this race wasn't just about first place. Wes Moore overperforms expectations, surging to a strong third-place finish, powered by a commanding share of black voters in Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. And Gavin Newsom just holds on to second, though his numbers here suggest that the Midwest remains a difficult region for his progressive coalition. Meanwhile, Pete Buttigieg, despite exiting the race, still pulls in double digits, finishing with a respectable 13% as his name remained on the ballot. But his votes tonight, they no longer matter for his campaign. They matter for Shapiro. Gretchen Whitmer, now weeks removed from the race, lingers at 4.6%, though her support has largely shifted elsewhere. Let's talk delegates. Shapiro racks up 57 delegates, his largest haul since coming second in Texas. Newsom takes 32, Moore picks up 31, and Buttigieg adds 7 from his residual votes. And with that, Shapiro has his moment. The question is, can he keep it going? Florida, Illinois, Arizona, and Kansas are still to come. The night is just beginning. Stay with us. And we have a projection. Josh Shapiro has won the Florida Democratic primary, a massive win in the biggest contest of the night. Florida, the third largest delegate prize of the entire primary season, has long been friendly to moderates, and tonight the state delivers for him in a big way. His message of electability and pragmatism clearly resonated with the Sunshine State's older, suburban, and Latino voters. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom does secure a solid second-place finish, despite his long-standing feud with Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. With 26.2%, he ensures Shapiro's margin of victory doesn't cut too deeply into his national edge. And Wes Moore continues to overperform, particularly in North Florida, where his appeal with black voters and military families helps him to 20.4%. Another solid result. Further down, Pete Buttigieg, still lingering on ballots after his exit, notches 12.6%, while Gretchen Whitmer, who exited weeks ago, pulls in 3.6%. Now let's take a look at the delegates. EP estimates Shapiro walks away with 96 delegates, the single largest delegate haul of his campaign. Newsom picks up 68, keeping pace, while Moore claims 51, ensuring he remains in the conversation. Buttigieg, despite his exit, grabs 9. And we're not stopping there, because we can now also project that Josh Shapiro has won the Illinois primary, another Midwestern battleground, another big win. This time, it's Illinois, and it follows the same pattern we saw in Ohio. Shapiro dominates among suburban and working-class voters, capitalizing on the fact that he's now the only Midwesterner left in the race. Behind him, Newsom secures 25.2%, again holding steady but consistently underperforming Shapiro here. Meanwhile, Wes Moore continues his pattern from earlier contests, strong but not strong enough at 22.1%, gaining traction with urban black voters in Chicago but struggling to expand much further. Further down, Buttigieg's residual votes give him 10.6%, while Whitmer pulls 2.5%. In the all-important delegate count, Shapiro adds 64 delegates, Newsom follows with 43, Moore collects 37, and Buttigieg takes 3 more. But this night is far from over. Arizona and Kansas are still to come, closing in less than an hour, and both states are considered friendlier territory for the Newsom camp. Shapiro is making his move. After a dominant showing across the Midwest and Florida, he's now sliced 74 delegates off Newsom's lead, proving this isn't just a fight for second place. It's a real challenge for the nomination. His victories in Ohio, Illinois, and Florida have cemented him as the alternative to Newsom, pulling in 217 delegates so far tonight. Newsom, still holding onto first place, has picked up 143 delegates, keeping him ahead but unable to put Shapiro away. Meanwhile, Moore continues to put up solid numbers, earning 119 delegates, but he's falling further behind as the race consolidates. Now, all eyes turn west. Arizona and Kansas are up next, and they could define the night's final momentum shift. Polls in Arizona had long favored Newsom, but if Shapiro can pull off another upset, this primary battle could be blown wide open. Stay with us. We've got a projection here in Arizona. Josh Shapiro wins in an upset. Newsom had led in the polls all cycle, but the late-breaking consolidation of moderate and suburban voters has pushed Shapiro over the top. The Grand Canyon state has long rejected candidates viewed as too far to one side. And tonight, that trend continues. Shapiro's electability argument, combined with his growing momentum in the Midwest and Florida, extends westward. For Newsom, this is a stinging loss. He had counted on his proximity to the state as an advantage, but the coalition of voters wary of his coastal progressivism has gained steam. He still puts up a strong showing, finishing just 2 points behind at 34.5%, but a loss is a loss, and in a tightening race, every delegate counts. Meanwhile, Wes Moore continues to perform well among Black and Latino voters, securing 16.0% of the vote. Even as the primary shifts into a clearer two-man race, some votes remain stuck in the past. In Arizona, Buttigieg takes 10.9%. Not a game-changing number, but still significant for someone out of the running. Whitmer, too, continues to register at 2.0%. Looking at the delegate count, Shapiro picks up 32 delegates in Arizona, just barely edging out Newsom's 29. Moore takes home 11, adding to his slowly growing total, while Buttigieg, despite his departure, fails to claim any. And we can now also project that Gavin Newsom has won the Kansas Democratic primary, a much-needed victory for the California governor after his disappointing loss in Arizona. Newsom was the favorite here, with the Sunflower State's progressive streak running deep among Democratic voters, and he delivers. He claims 40.3% of the vote, an emphatic win that stops the bleeding. But Shapiro isn't too far behind. He takes 32.0%. The Pennsylvania governor once again benefits from Buttigieg's endorsement, pulling in suburban moderates and consolidating the non-Newsom vote. Meanwhile, Moore secures 15.9%. Further down, Buttigieg's lingering presence on the ballot earns him 8.2%, while Whitmer picks up 2.4%. Looking at the delegate math, Newsom secures 16 delegates, Shapiro follows with 12, and Moore picks up 5. And with that, Super Tuesday 3 is in the books. This was a defining night. Shapiro's upset win in Arizona signals that Newsom is not untouchable. And with victories in Florida, Ohio, and Illinois, Shapiro has reshaped this race into a true two-man race. Let's take a look at the updated delegate count. With tonight's results, Shapiro picks up a staggering 261 delegates, cutting significantly into Newsom's advantage. The California governor still leads the race with 893 delegates, but Shapiro now sits at 674, narrowing the gap by 73. Wes Moore adds 135 delegates to his total, now at 477, keeping him competitive but still trailing behind the top two. And then there's Pete Buttigieg, who despite exiting remains at 407 delegates, an important factor as we look ahead to the convention. This brings us to a crucial point. The delegates awarded to withdrawn candidates like Buttigieg and Whitmer are now free to vote for whomever they choose at the convention. While most of Buttigieg's supporters are expected to lean toward Shapiro, they are not bound to do so. The same applies to Whitmer's 103 delegates, most of whom favored Shapiro in polling before she exited. Moore's coalition remains more divided. Some of his voters align with Newsom's progressive appeal, while others lean toward Shapiro's pragmatic approach. If Moore exits before the convention, his delegates could play kingmaker. One thing is clear, we are heading straight for a contested convention unless one candidate can decisively pull ahead, and the next few contests could tell us whether that happens. The next primaries take place this Saturday, March 25th, with Louisiana, Missouri, and North Dakota on the docket. Then after a brief pause, all eyes turn to New York and Wisconsin on April 4th. We have a call in Missouri. Election Pulse can project that Josh Shapiro is the winner of the Missouri Democratic primary. The Pennsylvania governor locks it down, delivering a decisive victory in a state that has long been a political crossroads, where Midwestern sensibilities meet Southern influences, where unions still pack a punch, and where suburban moderates are up for grabs. Tonight, Missouri chooses Shapiro. Now let's talk margins. A commanding 101,000 vote lead over Gavin Newsom, who finishes in second place with 30.6%. Newsom has not found his stride in the Midwest, and Missouri is just the latest proof that his coalition has trouble breaking through in this region. And look at Wes Moore. The Maryland governor may have halted his campaign, but his numbers here suggest he's still a factor in this race. With 21.2% of the vote, Moore once again scoops up a non-inconsequential delegate share, keeping this from fully becoming a two-man contest. Speaking of delegates, here's how they shake out. Shapiro secures 29 delegates, Newsom grabs 21, and Moore walks away with 14. But there's no time to dwell. This primary night rolls on. The next polls close at the top of the hour. Louisiana and North Dakota are up next. Two very different states, two very different electorates. The question is, who's about to have a very good 9 o'clock hour? We have a call in Louisiana, Josh Shapiro pulls off the win. An upset, maybe, a surprise, not really. Wes Moore led here for weeks, but as his campaign lost momentum, Shapiro seized the opening, consolidating moderates and peeling away just enough more voters to flip this state late. And make no mistake, this is a huge win for Shapiro. Louisiana is Southern territory. It's not a natural fit for him, and yet, with 40.2% of the votes, he pulls ahead of Moore, who lands at 34.0%, still showing impressive resilience despite his campaign's dormancy. And as for Newsom, a distant third at 20.6%. The progressive lane has struggled in the South, and tonight was no different. That means Shapiro walks away with 21 delegates, Moore picks up 17, and Newsom claims 10. Now let's head north, because we have another call to make. Gavin Newsom wins North Dakota, a much-needed win for the California governor, who hangs on in a state that twice backed Bernie Sanders. Newsom needed this. His campaign has struggled in the Midwest and South, but North Dakota's small but staunchly progressive base kept him afloat. A nail-biter in the plains, but Newsom ekes it out, winning 43.2% to 41.0% over Shapiro, as the Pennsylvania governor continues to consolidate support behind his campaign. Meanwhile, Moore finishes at just 10.6%, well behind the top two. It's clear that while his support remains strong in the South, it doesn't translate everywhere. Now for the delegates. North Dakota didn't have much to offer, just 13 total delegates. Newsom grabs 7, Shapiro picks up 6, and Moore gets nothing for his efforts. All right, let's take a step back and look at where this race stands right now. Gavin Newsom still leads, but the gap is narrowing fast. His 931 delegates keep him in pole position, but Shapiro is charging hard, now up to 730 after his wins in Missouri and Louisiana. For Shapiro, this is about momentum. He's gone from a strong regional contender to a national force, proving he can win across the Midwest, the South, and even take progressive-leaning states down to the wire. And then there's Wes Moore. At 508 delegates, he's still a factor, despite suspending his campaign activities. That's the big X factor in this race. He's pulling enough delegates to prevent a true head-to-head between Newsom and Shapiro. The question is, how much longer will his voters stick with him? Now let's talk about the bigger picture. 1,975 delegates are needed to clinch the nomination, and we are now 68% through the pledged delegate count. Newsom still has the edge, but Shapiro is within striking range. If he keeps stacking wins, we're looking at a long, drawn-out fight all the way to the convention. The big question now, can Shapiro flip the script and take the lead, or does Newsom hold on and grind this out?
This is CNN Breaking News.
And just like that, the Moore factor is gone. After weeks of staying on ballots but staying off the trail, Moore has now officially ended his bid for the Democratic nomination. In a brief but pointed statement, Moore acknowledged that while his message had resonated, the path forward had simply closed. He thanked supporters for defying expectations, spoke of a campaign that had challenged assumptions about who gets to lead, and in classic Moore fashion, left the door wide open for his political future. Now, where do his delegates go? That's the question that could decide the nomination. And we already know one thing, neither side is backing down. In fact, sources from both the Newsom and Shapiro campaigns are saying the same thing. We're fighting to the convention. Both sides see a path to the nomination. Both sides say they have the winning coalition, and both sides are refusing to blink. Newsom's team is projecting confidence. A senior advisor put it bluntly, "We have the lead. We have the votes. Gavin Newsom will be the nominee." Meanwhile, Shapiro's camp sees things differently. Their pitch? The coalition is shifting. A source close to the campaign says his campaign is betting that his national profile, progressive base, and early state momentum will carry him across the finish line. But Shapiro's team sees a different story. They argue that the party is shifting toward their guy with momentum at his back. One strategist close to the campaign told EP, "Look at the trend lines. Look who's winning late. This party is choosing Josh Shapiro." And here we go. For the first time this cycle, it's Newsom versus Shapiro. No distractions, no split votes, just a straight-up fight for the nomination. And what a battleground to start with, New York. 268 delegates up for grabs, the ultimate Democratic proving ground, a state that typically aligns with the establishment choice, and if you're watching the late-stage movement in this race, that might just be Shapiro. But Newsom, he's led here from the start. The progressive lane runs deep in New York, and the California governor has built his campaign around that very foundation. Still, there's a wild card. Pennsylvania is right next door. And when you're the governor of the Keystone State, that border might start to feel a little thin. But it's not just New York. Wisconsin is up for grabs, a Midwestern battleground where elections are won on the margins. Newsom needs the state's progressive voters to show up, but Shapiro has been dominating the Midwest. If he takes Wisconsin, it's another body blow to Newsom's path forward. And then there's Connecticut and Rhode Island, smaller, but no less important. New England has been unpredictable all cycle. Connecticut, it's got a moderate streak that leans Shapiro. Rhode Island, a progressive undercurrent that could tilt Newsom's way. But let's be clear, this isn't just about individual wins, it's about math. Newsom enters the night 931 delegates strong. Shapiro sits at 730. That's a gap, but it's not a wall. There are 459 delegates on the table, and if Shapiro can land a knockout punch tonight, this thing goes from a slow crawl to a sprint. And don't forget, there's an army of former Westmore supporters out there. His departure from the race shook the board, and now those voters are up for grabs. Do they flock to Shapiro's moderate message? Or do they stick with the progressive wing and boost Newsom? By the end of the night, one of two things happens. Newsom reasserts control, or Shapiro changes the game. Either way, this race is about to take a turn. The polls close soon. Buckle up. 20 seconds. The first true one-on-one primary night is about to begin. 4 states, 436 delegates, Newsom versus Shapiro. No more crowded fields, no more split votes, just a fight for control. At 8 p.m. Eastern, polls close in Connecticut and Rhode Island. An hour later, at 9 p.m., New York and Wisconsin follow. A critical night, a race on the edge, and it all starts now. And we have a call in Connecticut. Josh Shapiro wins the state. Another hard-fought battle, another narrow win for the Pennsylvania governor. Shapiro takes Connecticut, a state that was always likely to favor his moderate appeal, but one where Newsom made him fight for every inch. 48.9% to 40.6%. Not a landslide, far from it, but a crucial pickup in a race that remains as razor-close as ever. Newsom kept it competitive in key urban centers, drawing on progressive voters in New Haven and Hartford, but Shapiro's strength with moderates and suburban Democrats in Fairfield County and the surrounding areas carried him over the line. This primary has settled into a clear rhythm, a split electorate, 2 camps firmly entrenched, and no clear path for either candidate to run away with it. Shapiro banks 33 delegates from Connecticut. Newsom picks up 27, a win for Shapiro, but in the broader fight, the margins remain thin, but we're not done yet because we have another call. Gavin Newsom wins Rhode Island. Election Pulse can project the California governor pulls out a victory here by a thread, escaping with a win in Rhode Island, 45.5% to 43.9%, a margin of just 2,200 votes. The Ocean State wasn't considered a progressive stronghold for Newsom, but he held on just enough in Providence and the urban centers to cross the finish line first. Shapiro made it close, competing hard in suburban and working-class pockets, but Newsom's edge proved just enough to hang on, and once again, the delegate math tells the same story. This time, it's an exact even split. Newsom and Shapiro both take 13 delegates away from Rhode Island, and now we wait, because New York and Wisconsin are next. The polls close at 9 p.m. Eastern, and if this trend holds, we're in for another long night. Stay with us. Election Pulse update. Let's break down where things stand. Josh Shapiro notches a hard-fought victory in Connecticut, pulling in 48.9% to Newsom's 40.6%. But turn your eyes to Rhode Island. Gavin Newsom ekes out a narrow win at 45.5% to Shapiro's 43.9%. It's been a night of split decisions so far, with no candidate landing a knockout punch. And in the delegate chase, Newsom holds 971, Shapiro at 776. The math tells the story. This race isn't ending tonight, and the fight for every delegate is more intense than ever. Now the real heavyweights enter the ring. New York, the grand prize of the evening, a massive 268 delegates at stake. The final truly massive delegate haul of the entire primary calendar, and one of the final chances for either candidate to make a real dent in the delegate race. Meanwhile, Wisconsin looms, a Midwestern battleground where Shapiro hopes to cement his regional appeal. The polls are just about to close. We'll be back with the results right after the break. Take a look at this. Election Pulse has called the race in New York for Josh Shapiro. This is a massive win for the Pennsylvania governor. New York is the last true giant on the primary calendar, a massive delegate haul that both candidates desperately needed, and Shapiro gets it, but barely. This was a razor-thin contest from the moment polls closed, with Newsom running up margins in New York City, but failing to offset Shapiro's dominance upstate and in the Long Island suburbs. A symbolic victory, but in terms of delegates, neither candidate walks away with a substantial edge. Let's take a look at the numbers. Shapiro edges out Newsom by less than a point, securing 43.5% of the vote to Newsom's 42.6%, a difference of fewer than 30,000 votes in a state where over 3 million were cast. Wes Moore, despite having exited the race, still picks up over 10%, a testament to the strength of his appeal among black voters, particularly in Brooklyn and the Bronx. But at the top, this was a duel between two candidates, and Shapiro just barely lands the final blow. Delegates, Shapiro earns 130 to Newsom's 126, a 4-delegate margin, a win in name but not in numbers. This ensures that neither candidate will reach the 1,975 delegates needed before the convention. We are now officially headed for a contested Democratic National Convention. Meanwhile, let's move to Wisconsin. Election Pulse can now project that Josh Shapiro has also won the Wisconsin primary. A much-needed clean win for Shapiro, his first outright majority victory of the cycle. Wisconsin, with its deep Midwestern roots, working-class voters, and suburban moderates, has been friendly ground for him. Unlike in New York, there was no nail-biter here. Shapiro clears 50% of the vote, leaving Newsom trailing behind at just under 40%. And look at the margins. Shapiro wins by over 100,000, a comfortable lead in a state that has flirted with progressive candidates in the past, backing Bernie Sanders in 2016. But tonight, it's Shapiro who consolidates that vote. Shapiro takes 46 delegates, Newsom 36. Not a massive haul, but every delegate matters in a race this tight. Again, this is uncharted territory in modern presidential politics. No candidate will clinch the nomination outright. Delegates will head to the Democratic National Convention without a decisive nominee. Everything is up for grabs. We are now 79% of the way through the delegate allocation process, and the math is undeniable. Neither Gavin Newsom nor Josh Shapiro can reach the crucial 1,975 delegates solely through the remaining primaries. The battle for the Democratic nomination will hinge on how the unbound delegates from Wes Moore, Pete Buttigieg, and Gretchen Whitmer ultimately decide to align themselves. For Newsom and Shapiro, the mission is clear: rack up as many bound delegates as possible before the convention's first ballot. Newsom maintains a lead at 1,132 delegates to Shapiro's 953, but with 833 delegates still to be awarded, the race is far from over. The The largest remaining prize, Pennsylvania, Shapiro's home state, which holds 159 delegates. This is his golden opportunity to chip away at Newsom's lead and enter the convention with as strong a position as possible. The pressure is on, and the final stretch of this primary season is shaping up to be a brutal delegate scramble. Next up, Alaska and Wyoming hold their primaries a week from Saturday. They may be small in delegate count, but every delegate matters in this unprecedented fight for the nomination. The road to the convention is narrowing, and every vote, every deal will be pivotal. Election Pulse has called the race in Alaska for Gavin Newsom. No surprises here. Alaska has long been friendly territory for progressive candidates, and Newsom continues that tradition tonight. With its independent streak and a history of backing left-wing populists, the last frontier delivers for the California governor, who secures a decisive victory. Newsom wins with 56.2% of the vote, pulling in over 13,000 ballots in this low-turnout affair. Shapiro lands at 38.6%, a respectable showing, but well short of what he needed to flip the state. And now the delegates, 15 total delegates at stake, and they break down with Newsom claiming 9, Shapiro taking 6. It's a modest boost for Newsom, but in a race this tight, every delegate adds up. Now to Wyoming, Election Pulse can now project that Josh Shapiro has won the Wyoming Democratic primary. This one was much closer. Wyoming, a small but scrappy contest, has flirted with progressives before. Bernie Sanders eked out a win here in 2016. But tonight, the state swings narrowly for Shapiro. His strength among rural moderates and the small but influential bloc of union voters gives him the edge, pushing him to a razor-thin win. Let's go to the numbers. Shapiro wins with 48.8%, just ahead of Newsom's 46.8%. Fewer than 400 votes separate the two, making this one of the tightest races of the cycle. The delegate count shakes out as follows. 13 delegates were on the line. Shapiro claims 7, Newsom 6. While Shapiro only gains 1 net delegate here, that single delegate could be significant, given that he is likely to enter the convention behind in the overall delegate count. Every bit of ground he can cover matters. The unbound delegates from withdrawn candidates are expected to narrowly favor him, but to position himself as a legitimate alternative to Newsom, keeping the delegate gap as small as possible will be crucial. Between Wyoming and Alaska, tonight, Shapiro picks up 13 delegates to Newsom's 15, ahead of a critical showdown this Tuesday in Pennsylvania, Shapiro's home turf and the largest remaining state. And with 159 delegates on the line there, it could be the moment that either narrows this contest to the wire or gives Newsom the breathing room he needs heading into the convention. Beyond Pennsylvania, 20% of pledged delegates are still up for grabs, meaning this race is anything but settled. Every remaining contest matters, and every delegate secured brings each candidate closer to a potential edge on the convention floor. It's primary night in Pennsylvania, where Governor Josh Shapiro spent the day at his campaign headquarters in Philadelphia, shaking hands with volunteers, rallying his team, and soaking in the energy of what could be his biggest night yet. He knows the stakes. This is his chance to do what Gavin Newsom did in California, run up the margins at home. A win here isn't enough. He needs a statement victory, one that reshapes the momentum of this race heading into the final stretch. Delaware is also voting tonight. It may be small, but it sits right next to Pennsylvania and has a history of backing moderates, something that should play into Shapiro's hands. If all goes well, he walks away tonight with 2 wins, tightening the gap just as the final contests come into view. And let's talk about that gap. Newsom may still lead in the overall delegate count, but since Super Tuesday, it's been a near even split, with Shapiro actually holding the edge, 627 to 543. The moderate wing of the party has been steadily coalescing around him, but Newsom's advantage remains, built largely off his California landslide. If Shapiro wants to even the playing field before the convention, tonight is his best shot. This is about more than just winning. It's about how big he wins. Let's see if Shapiro can deliver. Here we go. Polls are about to close in Pennsylvania and Delaware. 178 delegates on the line. Pennsylvania is the big one, Shapiro's home turf, where he's looking for a landslide to cut into Newsom's lead. Delaware may be smaller, but every delegate counts. The final votes are being cast. The results are moments away. Pennsylvania, Delaware. Let's do this. Election Pulse has called the race in Delaware for Josh Shapiro. No surprise here, it's a strong win for the Pennsylvania governor as he looks to take this win in the first state into his home state in just a few moments. Delaware has historically leaned toward moderates, and Shapiro benefits from that trend tonight. He captured 55.3% of the vote, with Newsom at 36.5%. It's a solid victory, though with only 19 delegates at stake, the real focus remains on Pennsylvania. Shapiro takes 11 delegates, while Newsom picks up 8, a small but meaningful gain. And now the big one, Election Pulse can project that Josh Shapiro has won the Pennsylvania Democratic primary. As expected, Shapiro claims his home state with a decisive win, taking more than 62% of the vote. From Philadelphia to Pittsburgh and through the suburban battlegrounds, he puts up decisive numbers, aided by his continued strong favorability ratings, particularly among Pennsylvania Democrats. Newsom, meanwhile, at 30.8%, struggles to break through in a state that was always going to favor its sitting governor. Shapiro's victory delivers him 106 delegates, exactly double that of Newsom's share of 53 delegates. That means that together with Delaware, Shapiro has won 117 delegates tonight, netting 56 over Newsom, but despite that, Newsom still leads the overall count at 1,208 to 1,083. 84% of the total bound delegates available to the candidates have been awarded, with 627 remaining among the 11 states yet to cast their ballots. The biggest prizes remaining are New Jersey and Maryland, both in the Northeast and both bordering Pennsylvania, giving Shapiro an opportunity to further close the gap. For Shapiro, the math is tough, but not impossible. He would need to win about 60% of the remaining delegates to overtake Newsom before the convention. A tall order, but one he'll undoubtedly push for. For both candidates, the mission is clear: maximize every remaining delegate and enter the convention as the strongest possible contender. The road to the convention is tightening, and both candidates know every remaining delegate could make or break their path to the nomination. We've got a race call out of Puerto Rico. Take a look here as Election Pulse can now report that Josh Shapiro has won the Puerto Rico Democratic primary, a significant victory in the most consequential U.S. territory. Shapiro edges out Newsom in a tight race, claiming a critical momentum boost in the final stretch of the primary season. Puerto Rico, home to 3.3 million people, carries 55 delegates, making it a bigger prize than South Carolina and 24 other states. And tonight, the island has made its preference clear. Shapiro is their choice. Let's take a look at the numbers. Shapiro wins with 45.0% of the vote, narrowly topping Newsom, who sits at 42.9%. The margin? Just over 2 percentage points. A razor-thin victory, but one with significant implications. What made the difference? Pennsylvania, Shapiro's home state, has the second largest Puerto Rican American population in the country, trailing only Florida. That connection gave him an opening to build institutional support and gain favorability among Puerto Rico's Democratic voters. It was a key factor in helping him edge out Newsom, who had performed well in most other U.S. territories. Election Pulse estimates Shapiro takes 28 delegates, while Newsom claims 27. A one-delegate difference isn't a game-changer in the overall delegate picture, but it keeps Shapiro on track as he continues to cut into Newsom's lead. That gap now stands at 124 delegates, with 572 left to be awarded. Up next on the calendar is Indiana, holding their primary on May 9th. See you then. We're just about 15 seconds out from the polls closing in Indiana. 76 delegates on the line, and the race here is expected to be a little tighter than in some other Midwestern contests. Shapiro still holds an edge, but Newsom is within striking distance. We've got a projection right now. Take a look at this. Election Pulse has called the race in Indiana for Josh Shapiro, another crucial win for the Pennsylvania governor, extending his streak to 4 straight victories and solidifying his grip on the momentum in this primary. With 8 wins in the last 10 contests, Shapiro's campaign is making the case that Democratic voters are rallying behind him as the race barrels toward the convention. Shapiro claims 53.5% of the votes, pulling in over 402,000 votes, while Newsom trails at 41.6%, more than 118,000 votes behind. The margin is clear. Shapiro is tightening this race, one state at a time, and tonight, Indiana pushes him that much closer. The Hoosier state's 79 delegates split 44 to 35 in Shapiro's favor. Again, it's not a game-breaking haul, but it's another chisel at Newsom's lead, one that just keeps shrinking. Shapiro has been making incremental gains for weeks, and while Newsom still holds the upper hand, the once-wide gap is now down to 113 delegates, 1,269 to 1,156. There are 9 states left, plus Washington, D.C., Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The math to pull ahead is becoming steeper for Shapiro. He would now need to win roughly 62% of the remaining delegates, a daunting task and one that's growing less likely by the day. But this race isn't just about catching up anymore. It's about positioning for the convention, where unbound delegates will play a decisive role. It's another pivotal night in the Democratic primary, with key contests in Maryland, Nebraska, and West Virginia. Maryland is the big one. With 95 delegates, it's the largest prize on the board tonight, and one of the last major opportunities for either candidate to shift the trajectory of this race. A state with deep Democratic roots, Maryland has long been a stronghold for the party, and its electorate, diverse and suburban-heavy, will be a crucial test for both Shapiro and Newsom. Then there's Nebraska. Newsom made his final pitch to voters earlier today in Omaha, a city that has seen rapid growth and increasing diversity in recent years. That's no coincidence. Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, which includes Omaha, has awarded a single electoral vote to Democrats in both of the last 2 general elections. Tonight, Newsom is hoping for a strong showing there to keep his delegate edge intact. And finally, West Virginia. There aren't many Democrats left in the Mountain State, but with 20 delegates at stake, every contest still matters. Here's where things stand coming into tonight. Shapiro has been consistently closing his deficit since Super Tuesday, winning 14 of the last 18 primaries across the country. And now, with less than 500 delegates still out there to be awarded, he trails Newsom by 113. His chances of taking the lead in terms of bound delegates ahead of the convention are slim, but the closer he gets, the better case he can make for himself on the floor. Conversely, Newsom has every interest to limit Shapiro's gains here over the final month, and that starts right now. The stage is set and the clock is ticking. Maryland, Nebraska, and West Virginia are about to weigh in, with 121 delegates hanging in the balance. A defining night for the race. Maryland holds the biggest haul, Nebraska could shake things up, and West Virginia offers a final test of strength in coal country. The moment is here. Polls close now. And just like that, we have a call. Election Pulse can project that Josh Shapiro has won the West Virginia Democratic primary. No surprise here. Shapiro cruises to victory in the Mountain State, where his moderate appeal plays far better than Newsom's West Coast progressivism. This is coal country, and tonight it delivers a decisive result in favor of the Pennsylvania governor. Shapiro dominates with 60.2% of the votes, more than 77,000 votes in his column. Newsom, struggling to find footing in this electorate, finishes at 35.9%, trailing by over 31,000 votes. The gap is undeniable, and West Virginia voters make their stance clear. West Virginia's 20 delegates split 13-7 in Shapiro's favor. It's not a massive haul, but it's another notch in his belt as he continues to chip away at Newsom's lead. The next closing is coming up at the top of the hour. We'll be back with results out of Maryland and Nebraska after the break. Election Pulse can now project that Josh Shapiro has won the Maryland Democratic primary. This is a big one. With 95 delegates on the line, Maryland was one of the last heavyweight contests before the convention, and Shapiro gets the win he needed. Shapiro secures 48.7% of the vote, pulling in more than 579,000 votes statewide. Newsom, at 41.2%, falls nearly 90,000 votes behind. Shapiro's success in working-class areas of Baltimore County and the state's smaller industrial hubs carried him across the finish line, while Newsom performed well in Baltimore proper and the well-educated suburban strongholds around Washington, D.C. In the end, Maryland's 95 delegates split 51-44 in Shapiro's favor. Not a game-changer by itself, but another step in the right direction for his campaign. Now to Nebraska, Election Pulse can call Gavin Newsom the winner of the Democratic primary here, a much-needed course correction for Newsom after a string of losses. While Nebraska doesn't offer a treasure trove of delegates, every contest counts at this stage, and Newsom does just enough to fend off Shapiro in a tight race. Newsom takes 49.3% of the votes, bringing in just over 102,000 votes. Shapiro is right on his heels at 46.4%, trailing by only 6,000 votes. It's a sign that even in places where Newsom should have had a clearer edge, thanks in part to Omaha's more progressive electorate, Shapiro is keeping things competitive. Nebraska's 29 delegates are nearly a wash, with Newsom claiming 15 and Shapiro 14. A narrow edge, but nothing that moves the needle in any dramatic way. After tonight's results, Shapiro picks up 78 delegates, while Newsom claims 66, a net gain of 12 for Shapiro. That brings the overall delegate count to 1,335 for Newsom and 1,234 for Shapiro. The gap now stands at 101 delegates, and while Shapiro continues to close in, time is running short. Next up, Kentucky and Oregon a week from tonight on Tuesday, May 23rd. See you then. 20 seconds to go until polls close in Kentucky at 7 Eastern, followed by Oregon at 11. Two states, two very different electorates. Kentucky, a working-class battleground where Shapiro is favored, and Oregon, a progressive stronghold that should give Newsom the edge. We've got a call coming in out of coal country right now. Take a look at this. Election Pulse has called the race in Kentucky for Josh Shapiro. A strong win for the Pennsylvania governor, securing another foothold in the Appalachian region as he keeps up the fight against Newsom's delegate lead. With 56.8% of the vote, Shapiro outpaces Newsom by a comfortable margin, winning key pockets of moderate and rural voters. Let's look at the numbers. Shapiro racks up 246,000 votes, while Newsom comes in at 177,000, good for 40.9% of the vote. The race was closer in Louisville and Lexington, where Newsom held his own among black voters and progressives, but across the rest of the state, especially in the Appalachian counties and working-class coalfields, Shapiro dominated. Newsom did outperform expectations in eastern Kentucky, but it wasn't enough to overcome Shapiro's broader strength. Now to the delegates. Of Kentucky's 53 delegates, Shapiro takes 31, while Newsom secures 22. It's a 9-delegate gain for Shapiro, with one race down tonight. Oregon is next. We've got a call in Oregon. Election Pulse can project that Gavin Newsom has won the Oregon Democratic primary. This one was never really in doubt. From Portland to Eugene, Newsom's progressive base showed up in force, delivering him a crucial West Coast victory. With this win, he officially locks down the entire Pacific coastline, sweeping Washington, California, and now Oregon. Newsom secures 53.4% of the vote, racking up over 438,000 votes statewide. Shapiro puts up a fight at 43.1%, winning rural counties in the east, but in the end, it wasn't nearly enough to overcome Newsom's dominance in Multnomah County, home to Portland. The city's progressive core delivered a landslide for Newsom, padding his margins and sealing the deal. Now to the delegates. Of Oregon's 66 delegates, Newsom claims 37, while Shapiro takes 29. A net gain of 8 for Newsom, wiping out Shapiro's earlier gains from Kentucky. With just a handful of contests remaining, Newsom maintains his edge, keeping Shapiro at arm's length in the delegate count. Now with 94% of total bound delegates distributed, Newsom's advantage sits at exactly 1,394 to Shapiro's 1,294. And with that, we head into the final primary night, June 6th, where the last votes will be cast in New Jersey, New Mexico, Montana, South Dakota, and the District of Columbia. After that, it's convention time. This is it. The final night of the 2028 Democratic primary season. After months of contests, debates, and razor-thin margins, the last votes are about to be cast. Heading into tonight, Gavin Newsom leads with 1,394 delegates to Josh Shapiro's 1,294, a gap of exactly 100 delegates. That means no matter what happens, Newsom will still hold the lead when the night is over. But tonight isn't just about the numbers, it's about momentum, it's about positioning, and it's about convincing the unbound delegates who will ultimately decide this race. New Jersey is the biggest prize of the night, 126 delegates on the line, a mix of suburban moderates and big city Democrats. Shapiro expects to win here, but the margin will determine just how much ground he gains. Then there's Washington, D.C., awarding 20 delegates in the heart of the Democratic establishment. Newsom is banking on progressive support among young professionals and activists, while Shapiro is looking to make inroads with party insiders and the city's large black voting base. Out west, Montana and South Dakota offer 20 and 16 delegates, respectively. Newsom is counting on his progressive coalition in Montana, while South Dakota's more moderate electorate could give Shapiro a slight edge. And then there's New Mexico with 34 delegates, a state with a large Hispanic electorate and a history of backing establishment candidates. This one could be unpredictable. Both campaigns made late pushes here, knowing even a few delegates could make a difference. Final votes of the 2028 primary season are about to be cast. Let's see how it all plays out. This is it, the final countdown. 5 states and the District of Columbia are about to close their polls, marking the last votes of the 2028 Democratic primary season. New Jersey, D.C., Montana, New Mexico, and South Dakota. One last shot for both candidates to make their case before the convention. The final pieces of the puzzle are about to fall into place. Here we go. We've got a call in Washington, D.C. Election Pulse can project that Gavin Newsom has won the Democratic primary in the District of Columbia. No real surprise here. The nation's capital, home to the heart of the Democratic Party's political power structure, delivers for Newsom. With exactly half of the vote, he edges out Shapiro, securing 74,000 votes. While competitive, Shapiro ultimately struggled to break Newsom's grip on the district's progressive and institutional Democratic votes. Black voters in D.C. helped keep the margins tight, but in the end, Newsom's appeal among young professionals and the party's political elite pushed him over the top. Newsom claims 11 delegates, while Shapiro picks up 9. Not a massive shift, but another small boost for Newsom as the final results trickle in. Now to the biggest prize of the night, Election Pulse can also project that Josh Shapiro has won the New Jersey Democratic primary. This was the big one, 126 delegates on the line, one last major state on the map, and Shapiro walks away with a commanding win. Let's look at the numbers. Shapiro secures 54.6% of the votes, pulling in 862,000 votes statewide. Newsom, at 41.3%, lags behind by over 200,000 votes. A margin that underscores just how strong Shapiro's hold is on the Northeast. He dominated in South Jersey and the Philadelphia suburbs, where his appeal to moderates, union voters, and working-class Democrats was a perfect fit. Newsom, meanwhile, ran up numbers in North Jersey's urban centers, but it wasn't nearly enough to close the gap. And now, the delegates. Shapiro claims 72 delegates. Newsom takes 54, a net 18-delegate gain for Shapiro. The Pennsylvania governor has made the case that the Democratic electorate is breaking his way late in this race, and New Jersey just handed him another argument to make. Election Pulse can now project that Gavin Newsom has won the Montana Democratic primary, and by the slimmest of margins, just 431 votes separate him and Shapiro in one of the closest contests of the cycle. Montana has been a political enigma in Democratic primaries for years. Its urban centers, like Missoula and Bozeman, have trended left, but the state remains overwhelmingly white and rural, favoring a more moderate approach. It nearly played to Shapiro's advantage tonight, but Newsom's deep backing from progressive transplants just barely pushed him over the finish line. The result? A dead heat in delegates. With just 20 at stake, the two candidates split them evenly, 10 for Newsom, 10 for Shapiro. A win in name only for Newsom as we shift our focus to New Mexico, where Election Pulse has also called the race for the California governor. Another crucial hold for Gavin Newsom, but not as dominant as some had expected. He wins with 51.5% of the vote, securing nearly 150,000 votes, but Shapiro keeps it competitive at 46.3%, just over 15,000 votes behind. The Albuquerque Metro proved critical for Newsom with its more progressive, college-educated base, giving him the buffer he needed. But elsewhere, Shapiro narrowed the gap in rural and less college-educated regions, outperforming expectations and preventing this from becoming a runaway Newsom win. The delegates split 18 for Newsom and 16 for Shapiro, another close result in a night full of them as the margins between these two candidates continue to tighten. And finally, take a look at South Dakota. Election Pulse can now project that Josh Shapiro has won the South Dakota Democratic primary. No surprise here, Shapiro has had the upper hand in moderate, working-class states throughout this race. But what is surprising, the margin, Shapiro wins with 52.7% of the votes, a solid victory, but not quite the landslide his campaign may have hoped for. Newsom pulls in 45.2%, running stronger than expected in the state's progressive pockets, particularly in Sioux Falls and college communities. In terms of delegates, 9 for Shapiro, 7 for Newsom. A minor gain, but every little bit helps as Shapiro tries to tighten the race down to the wire. And now the updated delegate picture. With all 5 states reporting, Josh Shapiro gains ground, but only slightly. He picks up 115 delegates on the night, while Gavin Newsom secures 101, a net gain of 14 for Shapiro. It's movement in his favor, but not nearly enough to significantly alter the trajectory of this race. The overall tally? Newsom now sits at 1,495 delegates, while Shapiro has 1,409. A gap of 86 delegates remains, with only 14 delegates left to be awarded in the final contests. And where are those last 14, Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands, the final 2 contests of this primary season, held this coming Saturday, June 10th? They won't shift the balance in a meaningful way, meaning the next real battleground, the convention. With the primaries nearly wrapped, the fight now turns to the uncommitted delegates and the party leadership, as both Newsom and Shapiro make their case before Democrats gather in Atlanta this July. Election Pulse can now project that Gavin Newsom has won the Democratic primary in Guam. It's a small contest, but every delegate still counts. Newsom claims victory in this Pacific territory, adding to his tally in the final moments of the primary season. Guam's 7 delegates split narrowly. Newsom takes 4, Shapiro secures 3, a minimal shift in the grand scheme, but another checkmark in Newsom's column as he prepares for the convention. And now, the final call of the 2028 primary season. Josh Shapiro has won the U.S. Virgin Islands. The Pennsylvania governor closes out the calendar with a win. Like in Guam, the delegate split is tight. Shapiro takes 4 delegates, Newsom earns 3, a marginal gain but a symbolic note to end on. With that, here we are. The final numbers are in, and the 2028 Democratic primary season has officially come to a close. Gavin Newsom finishes with 1,502 pledged delegates, the frontrunner heading into the convention, but Josh Shapiro is right behind him at 1,416, keeping this race alive in a way few predicted just months ago. Wes Moore, Pete Buttigieg, and Gretchen Whitmer round out the count, their early exits still leaving an imprint on this delegate math. Now let's take a look at the map. 23 states for Shapiro, 18 for Newsom, 5 for Moore, 4 for Buttigieg. More states may have gone Shapiro's way, but Newsom's dominance in the biggest delegate-rich battlegrounds, namely California and Texas, gave him the cushion he needed to hold the lead. And now to the popular vote, and it doesn't get much closer than this. Newsom, 16.57 million votes. Shapiro, 16.46 million votes. A razor-thin margin of just 108,000 votes out of more than 53 million cast, setting a new record for the most votes ever cast in a Democratic primary. A testament to just how competitive this race became down the stretch. Wes Moore and Pete Buttigieg finish with 15.5% and 12.8%, respectively, both of whom played kingmakers as they exited the race. Meanwhile, Gretchen Whitmer still pulled in over 3.7 million votes, and other early contenders, Andy Beshear, J.B. Pritzker, and Mark Kelly, left their marks in the early states.
This is CNN Breaking News.
The primaries are over, but this nomination fight's not even close. We're heading into a brokered convention, or as some are calling it, the overtime primary. Others prefer the unattached delegate primary. Whatever the name, the stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just about who secures the nomination, it could decide the party's fate in the general election. Under Democratic Party rules, the first ballot at the convention is decided solely by the 3,949 pledged delegates chosen in the primaries and caucuses. That means Wes Moore's 520 delegates, Pete Buttigieg's 407, and Gretchen Whitmer's 103 remain bound to their original candidates, despite their campaigns ending months ago. To win outright, a candidate must secure 1,975 delegates on that first vote. But with neither Newsom nor Shapiro anywhere near that number, the first ballot is little more than a formality. The real battle begins on the second ballot when the Moore, Buttigieg, and Whitmer delegates become unbound, free to back whomever they choose. And that's when the party's 747 superdelegates, elected officials, and party leaders enter the fray. From now until the convention, Newsom and Shapiro will be locked in a political free-for-all, working the phones, cutting deals, and pulling every lever they can to win over uncommitted delegates. Expect calls, backroom negotiations, pressure from unions, and maybe even the promise of a VP slot. Nothing is off the table, so buckle up. The primaries are over. But the fight for the nomination? It's only just begun. Welcome to Atlanta, where history is about to be written. The 2028 Democratic National Convention is officially underway, and so is the fight for the party's nomination. But let's be clear, the first ballot is nothing but a formality, a scripted, by-the-numbers roll call that will reflect the exact results of the primaries. Every pledged delegate is still bound to the candidate they were assigned months ago. No surprises, no drama, not yet. Let's see the results. Newsom leads with 1,502 delegates, Shapiro follows with 1,416, and Moore, Buttigieg, and Whitmer's combined 1,030 remain locked in place for now. But don't let the calm fool you. With this first ballot complete, the real convention can now begin. The floodgates are open. The unbound delegates are unleashed. Moore's 520, Buttigieg's 407, Whitmer's 103. They're free agents now up for grabs. And the 747 superdelegates, party leaders, governors, senators, are ready to come off the sidelines and make their voices heard as well. It's no longer about the primary. It's about deals, strategy, and who can piece together a winning coalition. We'll be back with live coverage of the second ballot right after the break. Live from the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta, the second ballot is now underway, and this time it's a whole new ballgame. Unlike the first vote, where every delegate was bound to the results of the primaries, now it's open season. At the center of it all, DNC Chair Ken Martin, who took over after the 2024 election and is now tasked with steering the party through the most dramatic convention fight in decades. With the inclusion of superdelegates, the number needed to clinch the nomination has risen to 2,349. Every single delegate is now free to vote as they choose. That includes 520 from Wes Moore, 407 from Pete Buttigieg, and 103 from Gretchen Whitmer. And don't forget the 747 superdelegates, party leaders, senators, governors, who can now throw their weight behind a candidate. The voting has just concluded. Let's take a look at the results. Josh Shapiro takes the lead, but it's not over yet. While superdelegates and Moore's delegates split nearly evenly, Shapiro made major inroads with Buttigieg and Whitmer's supporters, catapulting him into first place. But not everyone budged. A significant chunk of delegates held their ground, keeping either Newsom or their original candidate afloat. And that means no one has clinched the nomination just yet. So we're heading to a third ballot. At this stage, Shapiro is in the driver's seat, but he hasn't crossed the finish line. He's 80 delegates short of the majority, with 243 still available. That means he needs just about 1/3 of the remaining uncommitted delegates to flip his way. It's not decided yet, but you'd much rather be Shapiro right now than Newsom. We're about to find out if he can seal the deal, or if Newsom can pull off a last-minute shocker. Stay with us. And here we go, Ballot 3. At this hour, the Democratic National Committee is operating as if Josh Shapiro is about to clinch the nomination. There's a sense of urgency among top party officials to bring this to a close tonight. They don't want this dragging into another day. They want a nominee. In a deliberate programming shift, Pennsylvania will be the final delegation to cast its votes. If Shapiro reaches the number, it will be his home state that puts him over the top. A symbolic, made-for-TV moment to cap off what could be the final ballot of this grueling primary fight. And the Newsom camp? They're reading the writing on the wall. No official concession yet, but multiple sources suggest the California governor is preparing to cede the nomination in style. Behind the scenes, discussions have already begun about unity, about messaging, and about pivoting to November. And now we have an election pulse projection coming in. After one of the longest and most hard-fought primary seasons in modern history, Election Pulse can now project that Josh Shapiro has secured enough delegates to clinch the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. From his days as a Pennsylvania state representative to his tenure as governor, Shapiro has carved out a reputation as a bridge builder, a pragmatist who rallied moderates, working-class voters, and party loyalists to his cause. His campaign was built on electability, steady leadership, and an ability to bring together the competing factions of the Democratic Party. But getting here was anything but easy. Shapiro and Newsom fought to a near draw in the primaries, splitting states and delegates almost evenly. That deadlock carried into the convention, where the battle only intensified. The tipping point came tonight. As unbound delegates and party officials made their choices, Shapiro gained ground, ballot by ballot. And with Pennsylvania's delegation delivering the final votes, the race was finally decided. 2,389 delegates for Shapiro, 40 more than the required majority. Newsom finishes with 2,252, and the few remaining holdouts stay scattered among candidates who exited months ago. It took 3 rounds of voting, backroom negotiations, and a convention unlike any in recent memory, but the outcome is now clear. Josh Shapiro is the Democratic nominee. The general election begins now.
Please welcome Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro.
That does it for this 2028 Democratic primary prediction. I hope you enjoyed it, as I've put weeks worth of effort into it. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and please leave a like on the video. You can check out more content from my channel here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.